going on, everybody? Sean and Steve here with episode 9, finally, of the Off Key podcast. We've had some scheduling conflicts. Steve has been very busy with work. So, unfortunately, we have not been able to bring what should be episodes 8, 9, and 10 to you. So now we're just on 9, 10, and 11, I should say. But yeah, so we're back. We're going to try and do another weekly scheduled episode each week here. And if you've been following along and you missed us, we appreciate it. So thank you very much. But yeah, Steve, what's been going on, and what have you been listening to?
I was going to say, by the time we get to episode 59, we need to have a 59 sound special. Just dedicated 100%. That's our goal.
Just to that album?
Yeah, in the next 50 weeks. And
I'm in.
Just shy of a year from now.
Basically a year and 7 weeks from now.
Yeah. Then we... No, because we're already at 9. It's 50 weeks away. We're under a year.
Oh, true. Yes.
All right, this begins the less than a year countdown.
Okay.
The 59 sound episode great special. But so no, go back to it. I do want to kind of start back where we left off before, because I finally did get through all of Sorority Noises. You're Not As Blank As You Think You Are.
Oh, okay.
And I just because I always stalled at First Letter from St. John, which is that third track on the album.
Yes, which is
where it was the first two kind of roll through, and it's pretty high level energy.
And the third track is extremely sad. Do you like the third track now?
A little bit. I kind of paid more attention, and unfortunately, because this was a couple weeks ago, my knowledge of the lyrics aren't as familiar, but once I kind of ground through that, I kind of had a better appreciation for it in terms of the way the album is broken up as a whole.
Yeah, it's very cascading, and
it's a weird spot. The sequencing on the album is weird.
It's very weird.
Because it's you start off high energy, and then the third track in an album, where usually that's where you put your single at. A lot of times, I feel on modern.
A lot of times track 3 is usually a single for a lot.
Yeah, it's 3 or 4. It's always the first single off the album, and right there is where they just put the saddest, downest, make you want to pull your hair out song. Mm-hmm. But once I got through it, it seemed like the album had a bit more ebb and flow to it. It wasn't all just that sort of downer stuff. But one thing that I found interesting was the second letter from St. Julian, that I think it's the 8th track on the album.
Okay.
But it's actually about Julian Baker.
Oh, really?
Yeah, one of the people we talked about a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I remember.
And it's basically a letter to her about him getting back into Christianity.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it was basically a very personal note to her. And he actually helped her with some of her recordings. I didn't know that.
Oh, okay.
But overall, I do appreciate the album a lot more now. I won't go too much into it because we spent a good chunk last time.
Yeah.
So I'll go into my other way outdated homework assignment as of now.
Well, I'm glad you got through it, though. I'm glad you enjoyed it. There's some really good tracks on that album. Some really good ones.
It is. And I think the ones later on, because No Halo was always really good, but I liked Car and I liked Where Are You a lot.
Yeah.
So, but no, going on to Catch-22's Keasbey Nights. So
the best ska album of all time, in my opinion.
Yes, it depends on which version you're talking about, though.
Well, the Streetlight Manifesto version doesn't really count for me. It's there and whatnot, but I've never really I listened to it, I think, once or twice, but I didn't really need to listen to it. It was I was so enamored with the first one.
Well, I think that it was it's tough to say. I think the energy on the first one. So to kind of break it down, so Catch-22 is what they call the third wave ska movement, I think is what they kept classifying it as.
I did not know that.
So, ska, I guess, has different generations in terms of the first generation was more of the reggae bass, I think Jamaican influence.
Okay.
And then it moved into sort of the European style, which is more of the ska punk. But that was more, I think, political. And I think it's got some Nazi tie-ins to it.
Okay.
In terms of just some German sort of skinhead affiliations. But
There
then
is some weird skinhead affiliation in the punk scene, so
yeah, but the third wave was kind of what got into like that Mighty Mighty Boss Tones era and No Doubt and all that stuff, where it kind of made this comeback of like mainstream popularity.
Mm-hmm.
And so Catch 22, like people almost I think talked about them as like there's that song on the album called Riding the Fourth Wave, and I think they were. I mean, I don't want to get too much into it because I don't know the different waves too well, but I think people were saying they were kind of like that next step forward.
Okay.
Because there was, I think, a lot more like heavier sounds to it, and then
They do have some pretty heavy distortion on that album in some of the songs, but they also have some really clean songs too on that album.
That's true, but so I mean, Thomas Kalnacki, I think, is the lead singer's name of Catch 22. But he was the one that, so they put out the album, and I think they were about 18 years old at the time.
They were super young.
Yeah, which is really kind of crazy.
And the album is incredible.
Yeah.
That's like some Silverchair shit. I think it's Silverchair put out their album when they were like 15 they were like Australian.
What?
Yeah, that like first album, I think it's from Silverchair. I think he was like 15 or 16 years old.
I can't remember the name of that song, but it was
it's crazy. Yeah, so I think Silverchair, I think the kid was like 15 or 16.
Was that the one? I think it had like a frog on
It's called
cover.
Frog Stomp.
Yes.
The album's called Frog Stomp.
And he was 15? Yeah. That's insane.
I think so.
Or at least even just to be at that age. And
he was under the age of 20 as far as I know, but I think he was like 16 or 15 when he like started writing that album and recording it.
He's like the lord of grunge music. It's Australian and 15 years old and making bank on it.
Yeah, that was wild. But anyways, back to Catch 22. I apologize. So they were 18 or 19 when they released that album.
Yeah, and then so what happened is Catch 22. They put out that album. They gained pretty good amount of fame, and then Thomas Kalnacki, who's the lead singer and I think primary lyricist and writer of a lot of the songs, ended up being convinced by his parents to like quit the band and go back to college. And then I don't know if that just didn't work out for him or whatever, but he ended up going back to create Streetlight Manifesto. And I think he took a couple of the guys from Catch 22.
I believe so. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know all the details, but they made 3 albums, didn't they?
I think they're still putting stuff out. Or no,
but I mean the original lineup. I thought the original lineup made like 2 albums or 3 albums, but maybe I'm wrong.
I know Kalnacki, I think, was only on this album, but I know that they had like a rotating cast of people, but that this, they did have some sort of like primary group that kind of stuck around. But I think after, a couple albums, it was down to like 1 or 2 guys that were in the original lineup. But what had happened is that 8 years later or so, I think it was like 2006 or something, Kalnacki had heard that they were going to re-release Catch 22's the Keasbey Nights. And then so he decided, he was like, I'm not going to have them just repackage this stuff in like new artwork and then sell it to people and just make a bunch of money off these kids. Yeah. So he had offered to re-record the whole thing, add more polish to it, have like, they actually had money, so better production value and everything. Yeah. And it wasn't about the money. Like he didn't care about that. Like he didn't care about selling it. But it was to kind of create what he thought it should have sounded like in the first place. So we can get into kind of like the differences between the songs later. But so that's what it is. There's 2 albums of the same name in terms of Keasbey Nights. One is technically by Catch 22. One is by Streetlight Manifesto. Both by the same guy, kind of. But you can pick and choose your different preference. I think you're probably more the old school, like original lineup. It's a little bit more.
And it's not even like that. It's just, that's what I like. The Streetlight Manifesto version didn't come out until probably, I don't know. I probably first heard Keasbey Nights in 2002.
Okay.
So 4 years after it was released. And I was like blown away by it. As far as like I just thought it was awesome. I was like, dude, every song on this album is great. Like, it's so good.
Yeah.
And then I don't know, when he did the Streetlight Manifesto, when I didn't really feel much of a need to listen to it. You know what I mean? Because I knew the first one so well.
How you feel about Friday Night Lights, the TV show? You're missing out.
That's true. That is how I feel about Friday Night Lights, the TV show. Never watched one episode.
Even though you love the movie.
But the movie is awesome.
But they did it right the first time, so why tarnish it?
Yeah.
Sorry, the train.
The train. El Tren.
But kind of, I mean, going through the track listing and everything, Dear Sergio is, I think they've played that song pretty much every show, I think, since. But
yeah, I saw Streetlight Manifesto with Ryan one time, our buddy Ryan, and they played that and like one or two other tracks off of Keasbey Nights. And that was a long time ago. I think that was probably like 2007 we saw him.
Is that the Metro?
Yeah.
I might have been at that show.
Were you at that show?
Maybe. Was Ed there?
I think, huh?
I said, was Ed there?
Possibly, yeah. I think maybe it was me, you, Steve, Ed, and Ryan. I didn't know you were there.
Yeah, that's how. I didn't really know any of the songs, but it was funny because I just remember one song where they kept going, they kept yelling "whoa" for like the entire song, and I didn't realize that was 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4.
Yes, yeah. That's the last track on the album, right?
Yeah, which is.
I love the thank yous on that track when they're like, they're thanking everybody, and the one guy's like, "Thanks, Ambassador Kwan."
Yeah,
and he goes, "Who the hell did you thank, Ambassador Kwan?"
But I think that to me, the biggest difference between those two albums is 1 2 3 4, because at the end of the Catch-22 version, it's just a bunch of kids in a room who are like goofing around and they're not taking it super seriously and they're just having fun.
Yeah.
Whereas like the other version, he gives this long like interview in a whatever you call it, where you type and like the computer speaks and it sounds kind of like a robot. It's just this long drawn out thing explaining why they did it and why they weren't, doing it for money and everything. And it was more of just like a stick it to the man thing. And it like those two differences, I think, capture the, the spirit behind each record, where one was just like people having fun. The other was taking it almost like too seriously. Like it's fun to have it like play loose and like the screams and yells and stuff that are all like in between the tracks. So I mean, if you want to find one that makes you feel younger and like kids having fun, then listen to Catch-22's version.
Yeah.
If you are an audiophile and you want to hear something that sounds better from a production quality, listen to the Streetlight version.
But I don't think the first album sounds bad.
No, it doesn't, especially for 18-year-old kids with probably zero budget.
Dude, and you can tell like, I feel like you can hear how talented they were as musicians, like on that album. To be 18, 19, mostly for those kids, they were pretty talented musicians.
Yeah, and
like at that age.
And I mean, you can't really go without talking about the title track and how freaking catchy it is.
Which track is it? What are the lyrics? Because I don't know all the track names.
Yeah, I know. It's third track, so it's Keasbey Nights, which is the my. You're gonna end by the end.
Oh, when the time goes by and you're gonna die by the end of the night.
Yeah, and he's talking about yeah, and it's just like that entire that chorus is one of like the catchiest choruses I think I've heard in a long time.
So I think my favorite track off that album is She roamed the hallways half asleep.
As the footsteps die out forever.
Yeah, that song is incredible.
Yeah, man. That caught me off guard because the entire album seems like so much fun, and then they have this track.
That song is incredible.
It's about like
so good.
I don't know if it's a true story or if it's his mom or what. If it's his mom, it's even sadder.
Yeah, but it's like I get goosebumps talking about it right now. Like that track hits me every time. I fucking love it. It's so good.
Yeah, for people who have not heard of the song, it's As the Footsteps Die Out Forever. It's the second to last track. And you've gone through this like fun 12-track, like, adolescent album about just kind of being young and dumb and like having fun with your friends kind of thing. And then this track talks about a woman finding out she has cancer and then 3 weeks to live and not telling her kids and just trying to like let them live their lives. And it's like that feeling of roaming the hallways and feeling like a ghost, kind of like it's an incredibly like it's a huge slap in the face, I think, on that album.
Well, and then to also like the tone of that song when they come out of I guess it's out of the chorus when like in my mind I could swear I heard her say
Mhm.
but like it's very like it's I don't know, it's like melodic and slow, and then it's very rough and fast, and then melodic and slow again. You
Yeah,
know,
and
like
then yeah, because it's when they kind of like become really aggressive
yeah, yeah,
towards the
yeah,
end.
yeah.
But yeah, and it's what do you call it? Lost her strength on a Saturday, spent the day in bed. Yeah, it's fine. It's just the flu, she said with a smile. But then they turned their backs, the tears would flow. So it's like she was sick, lying to her kids, not telling them that she was like dying. And then, yeah, basically watching your kids try and like go through their life without telling them this news. But yeah, it's tough.
It's an awesome song. The whole album is awesome. But what? So your best tracks on it are what then? Track
Um,
3.
Yeah, I mean, Keasbey Nights is like fantastic. I think that's a masterclass in terms of probably like one of their top songs in terms of Streetlight and Catch 22. And I don't know them that well, but of stuff I've heard, because I've heard Streetlights, Everything Goes Numb, and
Which is a great ska album.
yeah,
It is.
and Somewhere in the Between and Hand That Thieves. But I've just never listened to Keasbey Nights. Um, so that one's obviously great. And then the other one that I found interesting was the Christina, She Don't Know I Exist,
Oh, great song.
which
Great
is just,
song.
it's like such a,
11798.
yeah,
It's been a day that I've come to hate.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's one of those funny things because it just captures like
The
this.
drum beat in that song is awesome. Sorry to cut you off.
Oh, yeah. No, I agree. And it's, I think it describes like that perfect feeling of being in high school and like watching that girl that doesn't know you exist. Like, I mean, which is the exact,
Yeah, it's
style of the
great,
song.
dude.
But it's just like all those little stupid things, like even in the end when she finds out that he has or she has a boyfriend
Yeah.
and he's trying to be like, you don't know what you missed kind of thing,
Yeah.
and just kind of telling her off even though he's
Yeah.
never talked to her. But what's funny is I did find out that somebody found who Christina Bear was.
Really?
Yeah, and they were like, did you know that he existed? And she's like, yep, I knew him. Because I guess it's one of those things that like he used her real name in the song, so people like tracked her down, which is probably a
Well,
bad move.
okay, but to be fair, he wrote the song probably in 1997 before like you could hop on the internet in a moment's notice,
Oh yeah,
you know.
and find them on Twitter and
Yeah,
Instagram and
or
everything.
wherever. Yeah.
Yeah,
So like he wrote the song in a time where he was like, yeah, I could use a real name. Most people probably won't figure this out. Like,
yeah. I mean, he's probably playing it in like local shows and like generally trying to get her attention, and it was I don't know, but I just thought it was super
but it is a
funny.
great song. I love that song.
Yeah, and it's just I think it captures like just the feeling of being young and like just I don't know. It's fun.
No,
Um
I think it's great. And I love like the background vocals from the band. Like, do you have any clue who I am? Hell no.
yeah,
Yeah.
but no, I mean otherwise it was just super fun album. But I'm glad I finally listened to it. And I listened to both versions and I don't know. I
So
probably do
ultimate question, which do you prefer?
probably the Streetlight version.
Oh, that's disappointing to
I
hear.
know. I'm spoiled. I need my good music. But
You're good quality. You're high
yeah,
quality.
I'm an audiophile. I got high quality headphones and stuff.
But I'm glad you listened to it. I'm glad you liked it. Because I mean, for me, it's like that album in terms of ska. Like I've never heard anything better. And it's not like I go out and devour ska albums left and right or anything like that.
Yeah.
You know, like the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones album that had Knock on Wood on it or whatever. That's a great ska album. But yeah, I don't know. Keasbey Nights is the best ska album I've ever heard. You know.
Yeah, and I don't know a ton of it. I never really was too big into the I don't know how you would call like the guitar pattern on it, but the like it's fun, but the higher pitched just kind of. Can't
Your
even make
reggae
it.
chords? Your reggae
Yeah,
chords,
yeah.
basically?
I don't know exactly what you probably know better, but
Yeah.
there's a heavier tone to it that I think I connect with more,
Yeah.
as opposed to the other high pitched. Like, I'm describing this terribly, but I don't know, like that I connect with more just because of the music I like. So either way,
Okay.
but
Uh,
so that
well, I'm glad you listened to it. I'm glad you liked it. I hope it's an album that you'll listen to for a long time to come.
okay.
Uh, I hope so, because I mean, that's an album I'll play for myself probably maybe like twice a year. I'll like rediscover it, and now that we've talked about it, I'll probably listen to it at the gym at some point this week.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's one of those albums I'll always come back to. So
So
the homework for me this week, or should I say like 3 weeks ago, was the band Hotelier. And what is the
yes,
name of the album? Home
home
like
like no
no
place
place
is there.
is there, right?
Yeah.
Home like no place is there. So that's the album we're talking about, by the band Hotelier. And I listened to this album because I had a lot of time, probably like 4 times, maybe four and a half, five. The first song on the album to me is by far the best song. The vocal melody on it is fantastic. I don't even know exactly what the song's about, because sometimes it's hard to understand all the lyrics that he's singing. And I was usually listening to it on my walks, so I never really looked up the lyrics.
Mm.
Um, but the song is called An Introduction to the Album. So I don't know if he was just bored and didn't have another name for the song. But I love that song. I think that's the best song on the album. Uh, and then the band themselves at times had like remnants of Thursday in the album. Uh, and then what there's like, I don't know. That first song definitely, with the vocal melody and the way he sings and uses his voice as, kind of the instrument in the song, I feel like a lot of the times, and the
Mm.
guitar and bass kind of matched the vocal melody essentially. Reminded me a lot of Manchester Orchestra in that way, but not necessarily in tone, but just in style, I guess would be the
Okay.
best way to describe it. But then there's like elements where like they get really hard and heavy out of nowhere in these kind of like minor key heavy things that like had more of a Thursday-esque tone to them. And then I really liked Among the Wildflowers and the dog song. That's what I call it, but
The
it's called
dogs.
Heartbroken. That's what I wrote on my phone. I was like, the dog song. I was on my
The
walk.
one about the dog.
I was like, the dog song is awesome. But the song is about a dog. And
It's a metaphor.
yeah, a metaphor. It's pretty literal, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's I actually discovered something kind of going back, re-listening to this album and going through that again, because that actually has been one of my favorite songs, because I think the metaphor of the chained up dog not wanting to kind of like break away from its abusive owner. I guess what had happened was like that was one of the first singles that they had released for that album, and then they had ended up getting some flack on it because a lot of people interpreted it as a wife in an abusive relationship where her husband kept beating her and she wouldn't leave the relationship.
I love how people interpreting song lyrics that they didn't write are giving people shit about a song that they
Yeah.
didn't write.
And I
That
mean,
makes sense.
and
And it's also my song.
right. But I guess what had happened was because a lot of people thought that these sort of, from what I understand, is that people thought that because they were kind of equating women in abusive relationships to like chained up dogs, that it was like very insulting and degrading, but which would be, but I don't think that was the case. And actually what had happened was the singer was saying it was more supposed to be like a general version of these people are kind of chained to their shitty lives, and it's not necessarily like an abusive thing, but just
Yeah.
like you get it's and you could apply it to politics, you could apply it to just like becoming stagnant in your own life, your job, like
Yeah.
you get comfortable in a position where people treat you like shit,
Mm-hmm.
but you are fed and you you
You
get
have
by.
money. Yeah, you
Yeah. And so
survive.
it wasn't supposed to be specific to like an abusive relationship, but for people listening, the song depicts a person walking by kind of seeing a dog in a backyard which is like chained up, and their owner is kind of like treats it terribly, and the narrator in the song is trying to get the dog to come with them. He's like, I can give you treats, I can let you run free. And the dog responds at the end basically saying, I don't know what I would do if I was let loose and caught that male car or ate garbage for
For
food.
food, yeah, I have the
Like
lyrics
the
pulled up right
idea
here.
of freedom is so like foreign and uncomfortable to the dog that the dog is like, I'm fine here. I've got, I'm fed and I have a roof over my head. And like the narrator basically saying, I don't want to end up like that where I become comfortable in that situation. So, but they ended up stopping playing the song because I think a lot of people misinterpreted it.
Are you
And
serious?
yeah, but I think they had, um, and I listened to a podcast kind of interviewing the lead singer, and he basically says like if it was like he had actually approached like people to kind of explain to them that that's not what the song was about, but he had also gotten feedback from people whose opinions that he like really respected and valued and thought what they're like whatever his song if he wants to not play it. And apparently he never liked the song to begin with, so
That's so weird.
I don't know.
You didn't like the song, but you put it on the album anyway. I feel like the songs you don't like are the ones you keep off the album, generally speaking.
I think it was one of those like in hindsight didn't held up as much, but either way, going.
See, that's weird to me because when I listen to the album, that's like it's track 1 and track 7, which is Housebroken, the dog song,
Yeah,
that stand out the most to me, without a
yeah.
doubt. Without a doubt. And
Mm-hmm.
Housebroken stands out the most to me because from a lyrical perspective, like it's extremely literal when you listen to it, and you can take it however you want.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also, I think tracks 1 and track 7 kind of break away kind of from like the rest of the mold of the album,
Yes,
and like from a musical perspective.
and
Uh,
they're
so
not as like extremely heavy in their content, or
yeah,
they.
they're not as heavy, and there's definitely some songs that like musically are pretty heavy on there, but
Mm-hmm.
uh, and then it's really funny though. I forgot to mention this. So uh, when I heard the Housebroken song, um, when he comes like to the end of the verse, I believe it's almost like I kept hearing the part of Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds from the Beatles. The girl with kaleidoscope eyes. Like it's
Yeah,
essentially like the same vocal melody or like part. It's very similar. And I kept hearing it
that's
as I
kind of
was
funny.
I kept hearing that as I was listening to it. But I still love it. I still love track. It's for me, if I had to like, just tell people like Hotelier, here's what you should listen to. I would say tracks 1, tracks 5, tracks 7, and tracks 8. And 8 is I forgot to write down the name of it.
Discomfort revisited,
Yeah.
which is
So the intro and the I just think I think it's just musically a pretty good song. It's nothing like crazy. I just liked it. I thought it was also kind of breaks away from the heavier stuff on the album as well. Like the chorus is a little bit heavy, but the intro and verse I really like.
gotcha. And I think that song, "Discomfort Revisited," was actually it's actually revisiting an earlier song that they had done, I think, about some sort of relationship where like not wanting to let go of the person, and the person came back like later on down the line,
Mm-hmm.
and then they had moved on kind of thing.
Yeah,
I,
yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
that's kind of where it came from. I don't really know, but going back to the introduction of the album, the first track, what's kind of funny is that you mentioned the Beatles influence where they kind of had that thing. I think he was trying to play Blackbird and he kept like messing it up, and that's kind of what the song turned into. was like that
was
guitar
the
part.
first track?
Yeah, it's like he was
Really?
like trying to learn Blackbird, I think, and he kept messing it up, and that's kind of what that guitar part is. But that song, the slow build, and even just like the first line of "Open the Curtains"
Yeah.
is like, you know, when you talk about a novel and how important the first line is in a
Yes,
novel,
your lead.
like it sets the tone for the entire thing. I don't know, like just there's a live performance of them doing the entire song or the entire album, and seeing everybody sing that song back to him is one of like in like a small room is just really really kind of goosebumpy. It'll definitely.
I'm writing it down. I want to look it up because like when I put the album on, like you had told me about it, and I literally whatever it was 17 weeks ago when we recorded the previous episode. uh, I went out for a walk after we finished recording, like I normally do, and I listened to it, and uh, that first song, I was like, wow, okay, like I'm really excited for the rest of this this album. Like
Yeah,
I was super excited for the rest of it. And the first song opened so well and I loved it so much that I was disappointed in the rest of the
it does set a high bar.
yeah. And I was frustrated. I was
Yeah,
frustrated. It was so good. I was like, man, this vocal melody is awesome. Like, oh, it was so good.
yeah,
And it just uh you know, Housebroken hits pretty well and a couple other songs hit pretty well, but nothing hits like the first track does. Nothing.
and I think lyrically it's probably the clearest as well, because some of the
Probably.
other tracks it's really hard to this is actually one of the first times I actually went and read through a lot of the lyrics alongside of listening to the music, and I think there were just things I didn't realize that added additional depth, at least from my own perspective and history of listening to the album. And you know when you like listen to something for years but you never bothered to look up what they're saying,
Mm-hmm.
and then or you just had it wrong in your head the entire time because it's just how you perceived it.
Mm-hmm.
Like this album, there were so many parts like that where I didn't realize what the context of the song was necessarily about. But
It is hard. It is hard to pick up some of the lyrics on a lot of the songs. Like some verses you can hear clearly, but then they get to the chorus and it's harder to understand.
yeah, and I think Life and Drag is probably the hardest one because it seems to scream its way through the song, and I was in a that's probably my least favorite track on that album. But the right before that, they have that once it's Among the Wildflowers, I think, that ends with the little girl being like interviewed saying what she
Yeah.
would do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it was actually I found out it was his like I think it was his niece that they
Mm-hmm.
basically like it was with you know, the parents and stuff were in the room, and he had asked basically like very like simple questions, and slowly like kind of got he said he was trying to frame things like how adults treat each other like to kids, and it basically got to the point where she's like, what would you do if someone was so mean to somebody that they became insane? And like it was supposed to be like a, you know, if they basically became really depressed and everything. And the girl's like, well, I would stand up for him. And like there's just this little audio clip of this little like
Yeah.
5-year-old girl saying how she would protect her friends, and it's just
Yeah.
like it's really just I don't know, because it's there's a lot of dark topics on the album, but I don't know. I've been a big fan of it. I think the first time I heard it, it caught me off guard. But their second album, Goodness, I'm sorry, it's their third album, Goodness. They kind of like rechanged and reshaped their sound a lot. But
Do you
uh,
think for better or for worse?
good. I think it was for better. I think it
Okay.
was. I think it was a progressive way to move their sound. And it might not hit you the same way. You might not like it, but I don't know. If you're interested in continuing the Hotelier story, Hotelier,
I'm not uninterested or
yeah.
disinterested.
But I think the only other quick fact for me that I found interesting is that they did actually paint on that house.
They did. Okay, I saw that on the album cover. I was like, I wonder if they really painted that.
Yeah. So it ended up being that one of the guys that was in the band early on, but he dropped out of the band. I think like the house had been foreclosed on or something.
Uh-huh.
So he got permission from the kid who was in the band if he could go over there and like paint on it.
Uh-huh.
And so there's something to do with squatters' rights where the cops came by and they're like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And they're like, "Well, we know the owner." And then they said, who it was. And cops are like, "Well, clean up when you're done," kind of thing. So they did actually do that. But I think by the time they finished it, it was too late in the day because they wanted to do it early morning or something. But either way, they had to like go back and do it again. I think at the very end, they just ended up having to like Photoshop it anyways. But they
Oh,
did,
really?
yeah. So I guess that house is kind of like people show up there all the time, and the people who own it now are kind of just like used to people randomly showing
Like
up now.
taking pictures in front of it and stuff like that.
Yeah, but
Well, that's sweet. Yeah, I did like the album though. It wasn't like I said, like three of the tracks on it I thought were really, really strong. The rest of it I thought was okay to good. But
okay.
I enjoyed, listening to a new band I've never heard before. So that's always fun. What else you got for me, man?
Uh,
What's new
so
besides the
besides the train, just loves just dropping by saying hi. So something I had gotten into, the Bright Eyes.
okay? Been a long
So
time.
yeah, they put out their first. I'm gonna wait for this train to stop honking because it's really
I
obnoxious.
think it's made its
Can I
pass.
finish? Can I finish?
Okay, I'm finished.
Okay, I think it's done. So, no, this, and it's not really new, and I didn't really push my boundaries this week in terms of trying to find things that were like out of my comfort zone. Um, and so Bright Eyes put out their first album in like 9 years, I think, since Page, or I can't remember what the last one was. But the new album was called Down in the Weeds Where the World Once Was. And it's very wordy. And the entire album,
Both the album name and the songs.
yeah, I mean, I think that's just, so Conor Oberst is just one of those songwriters that really kind of has some abstract imagery in his songs, I think. So the backstory behind it, though, is understanding that I think his brother had died suddenly, at the age of, I think, 42 or so,
Okay.
in 2016. And his brother had been his like manager, and I think he
Ah,
was very involved in like the business side of his music, I think. But it was unexpectedly, just in his sleep kind of thing. And then between that time and between 2011 and now, he had also like divorced and separated with his wife. But it was like
okay.
an amicable divorce. But so there's like a lot of themes of that in terms of just getting older and the divorce and losing his brother and just kind of the existentialism of life in general, I think. But I didn't realize it was a Bright Eyes thing, but apparently all their albums start with like this sort of scene setting, like weird orchestration. Like this one they call it's Page Turner's Rag is the first track on the album. And it's like
Okay.
4 minutes long, and it's this weird spoken word sort of. He had recorded himself, his ex-wife, and his mom, and they all took a mushroom trip. And at the bar that he owns in Omaha, which is called, I think, the Page Turner's Rag.
Okay.
And they just like they had this mushroom trip together, and he just recorded it, and they talked, and um his mom was discussing like, you know, after losing their other son, like just kind of talking about happy memories about that. And it
Yeah.
kind of weaves in and out of this almost like dreamlike like stance. I don't know how to describe it, but it's very It's interesting, but it's like for the first 4 minutes of the album, there's no songs. It's just, I mean, it's a song, but it's like a introduction, and it's like, setting the stage for what the rest of the album is. But it was something that um, I guess is like a common thing. And Bright Eyes, right? Like you are familiar with Connor
Oh yeah,
Verst,
dude.
and
I love the double album he put out. What was it? Digital Ash, Digital Earn, and then the other album that was on it.
yeah,
So
because I
something
mean
he
he
put out in like 2004, 2005. I think he's a great songwriter. Um,
he's been writing since he was like 15.
yeah, he's a very good songwriter. Uh, I don't know a lot of his other music. I mean, that's one thing that's kind of weird about me as a music fan is I very much like I hear one album and I'm like, yeah, that was really good. And then like for whatever reason, I don't dive into the rest of people's discographies.
I do that too, though.
But yeah, if you aren't familiar with Bright Eyes and you want to hear um, if you want to hear what it's that's what it was. So he put them out at the same time. I'm Wide Awake, It's Morning, and Digital Ash, Digital Earn. Digital Ash
Oh,
in a Digital Earn.
yeah,
Uh,
and he actually toured on two different. He created two different tours for those albums.
See, yeah, I didn't know that, but I loved those albums. I love both of them. I think they're awesome. Um, and like I think you see the scope of his musical abilities on both those albums. Like you hear songs like First Day of My Life, and then like what is it? I think like Lover I Don't Have to Love, I think is like one of the songs on Digital Ash, Digital Earn. I don't know if that's the name of it, but either way, I think you really get a great understanding of the scope of his, where he can go from these like this acoustic, like really beautiful love song and
Yeah,
that kind of dark, scary, like digital tones. And it's a wide ranging thing.
yeah, and I think he hits a lot of those different notes too. And the one thing that Conor Oberst has is he does the wavering thing in his voice, which
Yeah.
to some time, on some occasions is done to such a degree that I find it almost like fucking come on, man.
Annoying.
Yeah, where it's like because I know you can sing a different way, and it kind of rings where it's like that waver lasts for so long, and it's
Mhm.
I'm sure a deliberate artistic choice. But there are times where I just feel like it's a little overdone, and that's not to say like the rest of what he has put out has been fantastic. And I don't really know that much. I had one Bright Eye CD that was burnt, and it was when I burnt it to my computer. It was just all track 1, 2, track 3, track 4. So I don't know any of the names of the songs. Um, but I do remember Halai Halai was one that I was like, I remember thinking it was just like pretty savage, like dark song. But this one, I don't know. It runs. There's a lot of real cool sounds to it. I think sonically and from a production standpoint is really
Okay.
cool. Um, I think a lot of the songs soar in sort of like this, like Dance and Sing is the first song that actually is like a song with him singing.
Hmm.
So track 2, I guess. But by the end of it, it's like there's this chorus, and it's almost like Heaven's Gates kind of opening, like
Okay.
sort of sound. But it builds, and he deliberately starts the first track with this feeling of like gotta keep going, like it ain't the end, gotta change your life, I'm dependent on it. And it's sort of just like things happen, you gotta keep moving, like life is gonna end. And then the last track on the album, which is Comet Song, kind of concludes that idea of like a cyclical nature of things, where like the comet, it comes and then it goes and then it comes back again, like down the line. So like these things just happen. There's a deeper metaphorical meaning I'm trying to get to on it, but I can't quite explain it in my words. But my favorite tracks on the album is Dance and Sing is really good. Mariana Trench I thought was really good, and it's just lyrically it describes a bunch of different contrasting sort of images in terms of like the choruses, looking up at Everest, looking down at the Mariana Trench, like the highest point in the world and like the lowest point in the world, and kind of talking about it, the things that humans have built can be knocked down so quickly. And like, but we're still capable of like really great things. But again, it's like the wordplay. It's there's so many lyrics in these tracks that it's really hard to kind of just pick them all out. But the other one that I really, every time I listened through the album that caught me off guard was "Hot Car in the Sun."
Okay.
I think this one directly kind of talks about his ex-wife and just like the feeling of like going through your daily motions after he's like been divorced. But it's probably the closest thing to a ballad, I would say. But just being able to say that like he still loves her, but they separated and they're still like, okay together. But it's still a weird thing to just end a marriage and kind of go through that. But I'd recommend it. I think if you like Conor Oberst and Bright Eyes and everything, it's a lengthy listen, but it's pays
How
off.
long's the album?
What's that?
How long's the album?
Probably like 52, 3, somewhere
That's
in there. Just shy of an hour. It's not like a double album or anything, but
no, that's not super long.
I think if you appreciate what Conor Oberst does and just kind of who he is as a person, I think you'll like the album. I think there's a tone to it that is very. I had like a good description for this. I didn't
Write it down.
Yeah, but
Yeah, I feel that feeling. That's my whole life.
Yeah, it's not like a weird haunted house, but it's something like I don't know. I can't describe it. So
I think you nailed it.
maybe I did. But no, it's a good. I would suggest. I enjoyed it. So
Down in the Weeds Where the World Once Was. When did it just get released?
Yeah, it was end of August.
Okay.
Which was a month ago, which is like right when we should have been doing this recording.
Yeah. No, I'll definitely have to. Check it out. So something new, I guess, for me. Well, something old, and I wish I would have listened to the album again before we did this. But I listened to it, I think, like probably twice, maybe 2.5 times. I think I got through it. But I was looking for just kind of scoping out things, and I don't know what brought me to Lou Reed. Who, if you're unfamiliar with Lou Reed, he sings the song "Take a Walk on the Wild Side."
Okay.
And he was the lead singer, and I believe like the founding member of the Velvet Underground. So
that is, I don't know much about them, but I've heard people talk about them. Like,
so they're a pretty famous band. You've probably heard a couple of their songs and not really realized it. I believe, I forget Lou's story completely, but I think he died of a heroin overdose at a pretty young age. No, he didn't. I apologize. I'm horrible.
Sorry, Lou.
No. No. He died in 2013. My apologies. But I know there was I believe there was like a decadence of rock and roll and drugs and that type of thing going on in his life. But I listened to the album Loaded, which is 10 songs. It's, as far as I know, considered probably his most popular, or the Velvet Underground's most popular album. It was pretty interesting, man. It was good. It was fun to listen to.
When did it come out?
Came out in 1970.
Oh.
Yeah, I went to the Wayback Machine for this week. And I wrote down, it reminds me of like a mix of Dylan meets the Rolling Stones.
Okay.
So there's these kind of like twangy bluesy tracks on there, but then there's these kind of like a little more like narrative storytelling, lyrical tracks on there.
Okay.
But the album has Who Loves the Sun, which I'm sure you've heard. If you go listen to it right now, you'd recognize it. And then it has the song Rock and Roll on it. She listened to that fine, fine music, blah, blah, blah. I forget the exact chorus and whatnot, but you've heard both those songs. I promise you have.
Okay.
But it was a very good listen. It was very enjoyable, and obviously like kind of rediscovering or, finding something that was recorded, what would that be, 16 years, I guess, or released 16 years before I was born. Yeah, right. Yeah. So, which
Do the math.
doesn't sound that old anymore. Now that I say it, doesn't sound that old.
It's still old.
But released in 1970. The tracks on it, obviously, "Who Loves the Sun" is track one. "Rock and Roll." "Lonesome Cowboy Bill" is like a very Dylan-esque song. It's this kind of narrative about this lonesome cowboy. The song "I Found a Reason" is like this very pretty song. I really liked it. It's very slow. It kind of has this like Motown / like maybe like early 60s kind of pop like vibe to it, where they sing in like parts and rounds
Okay.
during the chorus and whatnot. And then track 10 is called "Oh Sweet Nothing" or "Nothing," and is like a kind of a long, slow bluesy track. It's like 7 minutes long.
Okay.
But it's totally worth a listen. I mean, if you're a blues fan, if you're a rock and roll fan, I have a feeling that most like old school DJs, from basically the 70s, 80s, era would all tell you that that is an album that every music fan should probably go listen to. So I'm glad I spent the time to actually sit and listen to it. And it gave me even more appreciation, because I've always thought like "Take a Walk on the Wild Side" was a really dope song.
Okay. I know that one.
Yeah, exactly. But I've always thought that was a really cool song, very original, very unique. And then to go back and, listen to an entire album of kind of the band and him, creating everything, it's just really enjoyable and different to pretty much everything I've listened to recently. So
Yeah, and sometimes you got to mix it up a little bit.
yeah,
And I still like when I hear the Velvet Underground, which I still think is such a good name. I think Velvet is
it
just
is
such
a
a
sweet name.
fucking good word. But when I think of it, I remember there was almost like this resurgence in terms of all of a sudden it seemed like everyone my age was like, "Have you heard of the Velvet Underground?" And they talked about them as though they were a band that were of the modern day. Like I thought for the longest time the Velvet Underground was a band that was like around in the 2000s
Mm-hmm.
because people were talking about them with such like
Fervor.
yeah and interest that it was just I don't know if it was because of it was a resurgence or kind of the same thing where I feel like Springsteen got this second wind. I mean, granted, he never needed it, I don't think, but there was this whole new age of kids that were like, especially when the whole folk punk thing started happening and people started quoting, Springsteen and influenced by Springsteen, where all of a sudden this, kids who are, and I shouldn't call them kids, but like people who hadn't been very familiar with Springsteen outside of like maybe, Born to Run and Born in the USA and stuff, all of a sudden are taking this huge interest in his like backstory and, full albums and deep cuts and stuff. And he like created this like more legendary iconic status of, the boss. So just kind of going back to like Lou Reed and everything, I feel like there was a period of time where people were talking about him in that similar sense. Whereas
Okay.
though it was, despite the fact that these songs and the music came out 40 years ago, like it's just as important today as it was back then, and it holds up. But that was just my own interpretation because of what I had heard for a while, and maybe it was just my own circle of people I
No, I
was
don't
around.
think I don't think you're necessarily wrong. I think that happens a lot. I
Yeah.
think it happens, maybe not a lot, but I think we definitely have. There's bands that have that type of thing happen. I know, like, uh, and I may have mentioned this before on one of the episodes we've done, but there was this Call of Duty commercial that used "Paint It Black" from the Rolling Stones
Oh yeah,
in the
I
commercial.
vaguely remember that.
And they used Paint It Black in the commercial, and within like 2 weeks of that release of the commercial,
Mm-hmm.
Paint It Black was like the top single downloaded on iTunes. So you had all these 17-year-old kids playing Call of Duty, like discovering the Rolling Stones because the Call of Duty commercial used Paint It Black in the commercial.
Yeah.
And say what you want about commercialism, but the awesome thing about music is that the song can be so good that it can catch the attention of a bunch of kids who probably prior to that moment had literally no interest in listening to anything the Rolling Stones put out. You know?
Yeah, but then all of a sudden it shows up in their favorite
Call of
video
Duty
game.
commercial, and it's got that backbeat, and it's just like, you know, yeah, all of a sudden, like maybe, you know, 1 out of every 5 kids that downloaded that song went and listened to more stuff by the Rolling Stones and discovered that, and then maybe they discovered Muddy Waters and Buddy Guy, because, you know what I mean, like because of all,
and they just went down that rabbit hole.
yeah. So, but yeah, I listened.
That's what I wonder what like Guitar Hero did.
Yeah, I'm sure, absolutely.
In terms of just like songs you never knew existed, and then all of a sudden, because you're playing them and you're paying attention to, you know, the rhythm and like everything about it. Yes. Which he could play it acoustic.
Playing them.
The South Park episode. Guitar.
You're playing them plastically.
But at least you're giving focus to like the rhythm of the song and like some of the complexities, and you're giving it more interest than say it was like playing on a store in the background.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I can imagine that Guitar Hero did a lot for, you know, some old classic music as well, in terms of
for sure, dude.
A new generation of kids who just didn't know these songs existed. But
yeah, so that's my short kind of quip on the Velvet Underground's Loaded. It was very enjoyable. It's 10 songs. It's not.
I need to go listen to it. Yeah.
But you'll recognize like tracks 1 and 3. Like you'll recognize them very quickly. Who Loves the Sun and Rock and Roll. But yeah, so the Velvet Underground, they weren't around, I don't believe, for a very long time. I think Lou kind of went off on his own.
Okay.
And let me see. Let me see how many albums they put out. Yeah, I think they may have only put out like 3 or 4 albums, like full-length albums. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so they put out 5, it looks like. And the Loaded came out in 1970, but they released basically 5 albums from 67 to 73. But I think you hear a lot of different musical influences on the album, and I always think that's kind of cool when you hear that. Obviously, you know, you hear things taken from everywhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, dude, totally worth a listen. Enjoyable, nothing like too heavy, but some really like pretty cool and, you know, fun songs on there. And I just, I think it's a part of rock and roll history that you hear a lot of older people talk about, that like I've heard about for a while and I never really delved into a whole lot, and I decided I was finally going to do it. So that's what I did.
Nice.
Yeah. But what else you got for me?
Actually, it was funny you mentioned it a little earlier before we started. You know, August is over, so every time that happens, I think what comes after. And so I always think of August and everything after, and like every year I always go and listen to that album, August and Everything After by the Counting Crows.
Yeah.
And as familiar as I am with that album, I feel like I did not do enough homework on it.
It just hit its 25th anniversary, dude.
Was it? Yeah, 93. So it's 27.
It's 25th release, because somebody I knew on Facebook posted a picture of it and was like, you know, like, oh, what this album did for me. You know what I mean? Like, because they're slightly older than me. The person.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, Counting Crows was the first concert I ever went to, and so that was after recovering the Satellites.
Like shit, we've talked about this before, but we both feel they're a heavily underrated band.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know,
especially from a songwriting perspective.
Yeah. And what they do with like very simple, I shouldn't even say simple, but like,
Like, dude, Long December, what? Song
yeah,
is ridiculously good.
I wish I could find, there was a quote from like a Grantland article. It was like a band you can openly just laugh at. I've never understood the hate behind Counting Crows. Why people like seem to just love to just take a big steamy dump on them. Um, but like
Mix.
I think August and everything after holds up. I think everything that they've ever done really has been, at least in my in my opinion, I've always really enjoyed everything that they've done. You even sent me that one lyric like the other day of something they
Yeah,
put out that
because
was, I think, more recent.
I was listening to the Counting Crows Pandora station, and I don't even remember what song it was from. I think I sent you a picture of it. Let me see if I can pull it up on my phone here.
I think you
Uh,
did.
it was. Did I send you a picture? Yeah, it was this song, Possibility Days. And I
Yep.
forget the lyric that I sent you, but the song Possibility Days off of Somewhere Under Wonderland. I don't know when that came out, but I just like the song came up. I was enjoying the song. Then I heard the lyric and I was like, damn, that was awesome.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, so continue to talk about August and everything after.
So it's funny because for the 25th anniversary, they did actually. I didn't realize it, but on the cover of the album, there's the lyrics to the song "August and Everything After," which was never actually on the album, but it was a song that, like, when they were trying to record, demos and stuff, that they were trying to make that a song. And then they played it like live. They attempted it like a handful of times, I guess. And then at the 25-year anniversary, they wanted to do like uh, Amazon wanted to do some sort of version of A Long December with an orchestra, and I guess Adam Duritz was like, no, like that would sound terrible. So they were like, all right, let's actually make this August and Everything After song. So I just found out about this like 5 minutes before we started recording, so
Oh,
I haven't
really?
actually listened to it, but it's like a 9.5 minute long song. I'm very curious to actually go and listen to it.
So August and everything after was never on that album.
No, so it was like this mythological sort of song from Counting Crows fans in terms
Did
of.
they ever play it live prior?
So I guess it was one of those things where they played it live, but it was just like they were messing around. They hadn't really worked it out, and somebody had a bootleg version of it. And then somewhere down the line, Duritz, I guess, lost the cassette that had the
Oh, okay.
recording of his demo, so he had to like reach out to fans to find this bootleg version, and
That's
like,
crazy.
yeah, and then they somehow like reworked it, and they did a show with a Holly in like 2013 or something. And I think it was the 20th anniversary, and they did a version of it with the like some sort of orchestra, and that's what ended up. I guess 5 years later, they recorded an actual studio version of it. But so I'm gonna probably go check that out after this. But getting back to August and everything after, it's like I don't understand how people like really hate this album. Um,
All
like
right, let me stop right here. If you're listening to this podcast, go listen to the album and tell us why it sucks.
yeah, or why you like
It
it.
doesn't suck, okay? Because you're probably gonna like it. There's some great songs on there. Go listen to the album.
Well, and it's funny because I think it came out at a time where everybody was like, it was overly sensitive and whiny and like, woe is me kind of style. But like, you got to think what was in the era. Like, that was like grunge, and like Kurt Cobain was singing about like a lot darker things, but he's revered because of whatever. But Adam Duritz is almost like this, like, I don't want to say comical character, but I think like nowadays he gets a bad rap. But whatever. Going back to it, that album is so good. I think from front to back, like the faster songs, the slower songs, like, and everything in between. I think the instrumentation, they kind of had a lot of influence from like the band. There was like that alt rock roots sound in an age where like grunge was taking over everything,
Mm-hmm.
and they still like stuck to their roots and everything. But I mean, the
There's no
opening.
reason the album became so famous. It's not because it sucked. You know what I mean?
No, yeah, and it actually like it outsold In Utero, which I think came out like the week after.
Yeah. Like it's a super famous album for a reason, and the Counting Crows are a famous band for a reason. Are the Counting Crows like the Nickelback of the '90s?
Maybe, I don't know. I think they're they're definitely more
They're as hated as
appreciated than the.
Nickelback.
What's that?
I said I don't think they're as hated as Nickelback.
No, and I hear a lot of people kind of give them grief, but I think a lot of people are still willing to admit that they have like a lot of good songs.
They
Like
have a lot of great songs. Yes.
like Round Here is still one of like the greatest openers, I think. And even just like when that song comes on, there's like a 10-second delay at the start. So like you turn the song on, and then before anything happens, it just sits there for like 10 seconds in silence. And then it comes in with the guitar part, and it's like that step out into the fog um first line, which is like another perfect sort of narrative opener. um Step out into the fog like a ghost into the something. I should know this as much as I really like this track. I'm terrible at memorizing lyrics. I don't know how you can like not hear a song for like 16 years and still quote it, but
Probably
um
because I listened to the album like 38 times before I stopped listening to it. That's probably why.
probably. But one thing I did find out about like Mr. Jones is I never realized the meaning behind that song
I think
was
I've heard about this before, but go on. Maybe it was from you.
well, I had just kind of realized it, but basically they had made the song, and it was like, so Adam Duritz was part of a band called the Himalayans, which was like right before Counting Crows.
Okay.
And so him and Marty Jones was the bassist of the Himalayans. And I guess they basically, it was based on a real night where they went out on the town with Marty Jones's like the bassist's father, who was actually a really good flamenco guitarist.
Oh wow.
And I guess Marty Jones didn't want to end up anything like his dad, because his dad had like 5 children with 5 women. And so
Oh, okay.
but the entire night was basically Adam Duritz watching like how the crowd reacted to him, and basically this thought of wanting to be famous, and like that's what he wrote the song as. And they had no exposure to fame or anything like prior to it. But then he wrote the song about like becoming famous, and then they became famous, and now he hates being famous, and like he's like I think he's pretty notorious for being one of those guys who's like he's had nervous breakdowns, like depression and all that stuff. And
Yeah,
like
he has doesn't he have bipolar something or other?
yeah, I I don't know the name of it, but he's
It's pretty intense.
yeah, but he's on record of like kind of, and that's what Recovering the Satellites was kind of all about, was just that being shoved into fame from basically, nothing to, selling 7 million albums on your first album. And so nowadays they play like different lyrics, and they barely ever play the song, I guess, live now. But when they do, it's like a really sad song, as opposed to Mr. Jones, like the
The
fun radio
original
friendly
happy version.
version. Yeah, because he's basically saying how much he hates being famous, and like so it's kind of just like this weird tragic history behind the song that I never knew about. um but I mean, everything else on that track, like Anna Begins is beautiful, and it's basically like trying to convince a girl that he's like breaking up with her. And then Rain King is super fun. Should know more about what it's actually about. Like, I don't know. The whole album is one of those like, it's coming up on fall, like leaves are changing. Go turn this album on and enjoy it. But
That's how I feel about most of the Death Cab albums. Like around fall, Death Cab
yeah,
is
it just
perfect.
it sets a perfect soundtrack. But
Uh, the lyric I was thinking of to the song "Possibility of Days" was, "And the worst part of a good day is knowing it's slipping away." That
yeah,
was the one I had sent you. But yeah, Adam Duritz is a great songwriter, and like, I mean, like, Long December is probably my favorite song of theirs. Uh, I could listen to that song multiple times over and over again, and enjoy different parts of it every single time.
Well, they're one of those bands that, and I've been fortunate enough to see them twice live. I
I
saw
saw
them
them
once.
with you once.
You saw them?
Yeah, we were at, wasn't it?
Oh, a Taste of Chicago. Yeah, yeah. So that was one of the times. The other time, no, I should say 3 times, because I saw them Taste of Chicago like a couple years ago, and I remember reading like a thing in the Chicago Tribune where like the music critic even took a couple stabs
I
at
remember
them.
you showed that
And
to
I'm
me.
like, how are you? What? They're like these washed up guys. I'm like, they just put out a good album. But anyways, they get no respect. And then I saw them at Ravinia a few years ago. And that was a really cool, and they played like, I think it was with Augustana or something, but Ravinia itself is just a really cool venue if you haven't been there. But I still remember like they had changed up so many of the songs, where they keep that same skeletal structure of the song, but then they'll mix up the instrumentation, like how fast it is, they'll slow it down, like acoustic versions of stuff. So like they're one of those bands that like they can take these old songs and just rework them, and it's like a unique, not to the point of not being the song anymore, but still being something really like you're getting your money's worth. You're not just hearing the
Well, and that's a testament too to like the band staying together and them being like true musicians, and like practicing and playing together all the time. And it's like, no, we could do it this way, like, and just have fun with it,
yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, the first time I saw them, it was like right after Recovering the Satellites came out. It was my first concert. It was them, and it was the Wallflowers after
Nice. I
bringing
just
down.
heard Sixth Avenue Heartache today on
That
Kevin
song's so
Ford's
good.
radio.
Yeah, that makes sense then. But I saw them at whatever Tweeter Center, and my mom took me, which is like,
Thanks, Mom.
yeah, thanks, Mom. I still remember it, and it was like, I don't know, like thinking back now, there's just a really cool first show to be able to see.
Dude, they're a very good band. Everybody loves to hate them, but there's some '90s bands out there that are fantastic.
Yeah, but so I mean, I wish I had more to say about them in terms of just something with deeper meaning. But
Well, we're at about an hour 10, Steve. So where else you want to go from here?
well, I do want to hear what you had to say about the Billy Strings show.
The Billy Strings show is awesome. To those of you who are not familiar, Billy Strings is a bluegrass guitar player who has a band, and they just go by the band name of Billy Strings. Absolutely phenomenal guitar player. He put out a new album called Home in 2019, and so I got to see him at the McHenry Drive-In on Thursday night. It is now Saturday night, so that we're recording this. So I'm trying to pull up the set list real quick. Give me just a moment here. September 17th. Here we go. He played. He did a absolutely phenomenal cover of, where was it? In the second set. Four Sticks, the Led Zeppelin song. And he did, there's a really good song. So the last two songs he did were, or two of the last three songs he did were Home and Away from the Mire, and Home and Away from the Mire on the album that came out in 2019. And he plays a lot of covers just because, like, if you're going to do two sets, like he didn't repeat any songs from the night before. So his two most famous songs are Dust in a Baggie and Turmoil and Turmoil and Tinfoil. Both great songs. If you have any interest in country music or kind of or bluegrass at all, you probably know who this guy is. But he is a lightning fast guitar player. When he wants to like throw it down, and to throw it down in that fashion on an acoustic guitar is not easy to do. Obviously, that's the style he's been playing in his whole life. a lot of the chord progressions are similar, G, C, and D, which is very common in bluegrass music. And you might move the capo up or down the neck and that type of thing. But the band themselves were great. It was a unique experience to be at the drive-in.
Mm-hmm.
We had front row, but when we got there, because your ticket was guaranteed for front row,
Yeah.
so we didn't think we needed to get there early. So we got there and they shoved us on the side of the stage. Like we literally could barely see, we couldn't see the performance, but we could see the screen of the performance.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah. Even though we paid for premium seating, we were not, and it says right on your ticket, like you're guaranteed a spot in the first 2 rows. That's what it says right on your ticket.
Yeah.
So we were complaining kind of politely, but we were like, dude, we spent a lot of money on premium seating tickets because that's what was offered to us. You know what I mean? So like
Yeah.
it says right there, we're guaranteed. So at set break, they moved us from the side to the front row. The sound was way better.
Yeah.
We had a great time, and it was just it's a unique experience to see a show like that because you have lots of space. You know what I mean? Like you're allowed to get out of your car.
Yeah.
But your mask has to be on and everything. Thank you, 2020. And you have all the space. You can bring as much beer as you wanted in your car. Like we had a cooler full of beer.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so that was cool. But and thankfully I have family in McHenry, so my cousin Bobby lives literally a 7-minute drive from the drive-in theater.
Nice.
So we went back to his place. But the show was great. If you haven't listened to the album Home, I would say go listen to it. It's a very there's like Home, Away from the Mire. Let me pull up the track listings for that album. But there's like, huh?
So I listened to one of the newer tracks, just like when you told me about it, I was just trying to see what I knew.
What did you think of it?
I enjoyed it. I think it was a very traditional sound.
Yeah, it's very bluegrass. Watch It Fall. That's the other song on that album that I really, really love. So actually 4, 5, and 6 are come together really, really well. Those are probably the ones that stand out the most to me. And actually 4, 5, 6, and 7. But there's some intricate parts in the middle of Away from the Mire and Home that are really, really cool when you go listen to the studio versions. But yeah, it was great, man. It was awesome to be back at live music. They sounded awesome. His guitar playing is ridiculous. The mandolin players, like the whole band's great.
Mm-hmm.
And you could tell they were having a ton of fun. Like they want to, these musicians want to be performing live just as much as we want to be seeing live music. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so you could tell they were having a great time. And it was cold too, man. When I say cold, it was probably about 50 degrees. But if you play an instrument, like if your hands are cold, it is not easy.
Especially playing that fast.
To play.
Yeah.
He was still very on point. Very, very on point. So, yeah, it was really cool, man. I enjoyed it a lot. Real quick, I have an honorable mention. There's a hip-hop artist named Wax that my cousin, who I actually went to the show with, he had told me about a couple of weeks ago. And he's a very, like, self-deprecating rapper. You can tell he's got, like, a lot – it sounds like he has a lot of problems with, like, partying and whatnot. And he raps about how he shouldn't be doing it but continues to do it anyway. He has an album called Living Foul that came out in 2015. So that was an album I listened to a couple of weeks ago. But if it's hip hop, it's rap. But the crazy thing is the first song on the album is a straight blues song. It's straight blues. It's like not rap at all.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure he's playing guitar on it. But the artist's name is Wax, W-A-X. And the album's called Living Foul. So check that out. Yeah, that's pretty much all I got for right now.
Yeah, I actually had a recommendation, honorable mention from my cousin, Frank.
Frank.
Hey, Frank. And he actually had sent over, it was the International Noise Conspiracy.
That's a sweet band name.
Yeah, especially because a lot of what they sing about is like capitalism and everything.
Oh, you froze.
I froze? You
okay.
Froze. I can see you fine.
You're
but so the song I listened to is New Empire Blues off of I forgot which album it was, but I was like, why does this guy sound so familiar? And what I realized was it was Dennis Lixon, which is the singer of Refused, who did The Shape of Punk to Come that we talked about like 3 or 4 episodes
Oh
ago.
shit! Really?
Yeah, so I guess when the Refused broke up, he went and started International Noise Conspiracy, but it's not as intense. It's not like
Yeah.
you know, an aggressive assault on your ears.
Yeah.
Um, this was much more like there's a saxophone in it, and there's
Uh-huh.
like a little bit more like it's not straight.
What was the song called again?
The song was New Empire Blues. I forget, it was their second album, I think. Find We are so professional. But yeah, it was weird because I was just, when I had heard it, realized that it was the same guy, different band and everything, but different sound. But they definitely mix it up in terms of what you would expect from, uh, that style, that genre, or whatever. But the
Okay.
album was A New Morning, Changing Weather. I listened to a handful of tracks. I had a little bit to check it out today. But I did listen to New Empire Blues, and there's like a saxophone that comes in at the end, and it's just really jazzy is probably not the right word, but it just adds this like really cool effect to the song.
That's
Um, but yeah, I mean, like some of the tracks on the album, there's one of them's called "Capitalism Stole My Virginity." Um, Bigger cages, longer chains. Like I think it's more of kind of like those anarchist style lyrics to them, but
uh-huh.
set to like a less aggressive beat. But
Gotcha.
it's definitely interesting, and knowing that it was the same dude from Refused, I'm kind of interested. I did read one quick thing that when they first toured outside of Sweden, they would play shows in China, where outside of they would have to play the shows illegally, and they were playing in like these hidden rock clubs, and the
Okay.
Chinese police would find out about it, and they would be like waiting outside of the shows with like guns and nightsticks. Like,
Sounds scary as hell.
yeah, so that's, I guess, what you have to do when you're a punk band traveling to China. Um, so I mean, that was kind of it for me. The only other thing I wanted to say was I did discover a podcast called Dissect, and it's very similar to the Song Exploder podcast we talked about before, but the guy takes like literally each episode is a track by track analysis of like different albums. And the first one that he was going was Kendrick Lamar's Good Kid, Mad City.
Okay.
So, but I mean, he goes in depth in terms of like historical reasons. Like, it was very, very thorough in its
Mhm.
analysis of the song, and it was done in such a way that I thought was just very like, I didn't know I could learn that much from like a 30-minute. I didn't know there was that much to say about a song. And
And
to
it's
know
just
that
one song. It's one song, 30 minutes.
yeah, but he goes like each season. So the season is dedicated to like, whatever, it's 15 episodes.
Dedicated to an album, pretty much.
Yeah, and each episode is a song, and each episode's like maybe 30 minutes long. And then he
Gotcha.
also does some sort of like setup behind it in terms of like the historical background of like the city. Like he talks about Compton and the history of Compton,
Mhm.
um, and the history of Kendrick Lamar. The only downside I would say is I think after 5 or 6 seasons, it's all uh, they're all rap albums. I think he does Kendrick Lamar's Good Kid, Mad City, and maybe Damn. And he does Frank Ocean, which isn't really rap, but well, and Beyonce. I shouldn't say it's all rap, but
It's more like, it's usually like
I
pop.
just wish you would do like the Counting Crows and do a
Yes.
season on the Counting Crows.
It's more like R&B, pop, hip hop. It's not really stuff we talk about.
Yeah, but
Okay.
so yeah, I guess it was just more so I'm less familiar with the content, but
Gotcha.
that's that, man. Not too much.
All right. Well, that's going to wrap it for episode 9 then. And to anybody that's keeping up with us, again, we appreciate it. People following us on Instagram. If you have suggestions, feel free to hit us up on Instagram or on the YouTube comments, whatever you want to do. Thanks for watching, everybody, or listening. And we should be back next week, unless Steve is extremely busy.
Nope,
With,
I'll be here.
okay,
Count me in.
with episode 10, and we will only be 49 episodes away from our 59 sound extravaganza episode.
Just get ready for it, folks.
Yeah, so have a good night, everybody, or a good day. Thank you for listening, and we will talk to you next week.
Peace out.